Today we're talking about pruning, specifically about fruit trees. Next weekend I'm doing general pruning, so shrubs, trees, like the whole gamut. Today is more specifically about that fruit tree that you either inherited and it's this massive and you don't know what to do, or the prices at the grocery store are going up so much you want a fruit tree and you're not really sure if it's going to work for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some things other than pruning to start off with, and that is the dormant spray, pruning paint, fertilizer, just things like that to get going. Because if you are going to have a fruit tree, or if you do have a fruit tree, you need to know about these regardless. And so we'll start in on about the dormant oil. This is the number one spray for homeowners with fruit trees. Okay, with everything being taken off the market, diazinon, Saigon, all that fun stuff. Not here about the debating about it, but this is about the only one that you have left to make sure that you spray. Okay, so in this is a combination of dormant oil, which is your organic insecticide, and lime sulfur, which is your organic fungicide. Okay, for trees like apricots that are sulfur shy, and basically nectarines and peaches as well, you're better off to go to copper spray, okay, because it's better for a fungicide on apricots and peaches. Okay, so the dormant oil, like I said, is your insecticide for your overwintering mites and aphids that are overwintering on the wood right now. You spray this after you've pruned the tree because there will be less wood. Okay, dormant oil is good for everything in your yard, not just fruit trees, except for you don't go and spray dormant oil like on a blue spruce because it will turn green. The lime sulfur, like I mentioned, is your fungicide. You really want to spray that on your apples and your pears because they'll get fire blight. They have a lot of issues with fungal disease on the trunks themselves. Okay, and then the copper is good before apricots, which, well, you never have an apricot, but if you have an apricot, the copper is good for that, for the gall, the oozing on the bark of the wood and stuff. Yeah. When should you spray this? That's the biggest question that we have. So what we do is from bud swell. Okay, so you have the dormant branches that we have now. So obviously this is very dormant. So from dormancy to half-inch green, meaning the bud is a half-inch long. Okay, anything after that, you're going to burn, especially if you're using lime sulfur, you're going to burn your flower buds. Okay, so which is okay if you have an apricot. Go ahead, do it. I'm okay with that. I have a lot of trauma from apricots. If you can't, we'll get to that story later on. But so from dormancy to half-inch green, that's when you spray the dormant oil. Except for on cherry trees. Cherry trees, you want to spray it when it's quite dormant. Like you're almost, if you live in the river bottom, you've actually gone past the time to spray your dormant oil on cherry trees. Because what happens if you spray it now, it gums up the flowers. Okay, so they won't open, you get less of a crop. Okay. The next one is pruning paste. Okay, not a big fan. We're going to teach you things today that when the tree is young, hopefully you have a young tree, you're going to work through it, that you'll never have to take off great big major limbs. Okay, the only time I'd use pruning paste is anything that's over, that can't heal in a year. And even then, if it's a healthy tree, I would probably not do any sort of paste. If it's a healthy, good, vigorous tree, nothing man-made will heal that tree better than the tree itself. Okay, what happens is that people will make cuts, and there's been a number of them that'll come, and every cut they make, they seal it. Okay, what you're actually doing is you're actually sealing in the moisture, the disease, whatever it is in there, and you think you did a great job, but meanwhile, underneath that seal, it's actually rotting into the tree. So if you took an x-ray of the tree, it's rotting, it's a weak tree. So not a big fan of that. The only time I use this, there again, not talking about fruit trees, but is maybe with roses, because the cane borer, for example, you make your rose cut, put that on top if you had cane borer before. Fertilizer. So there again, you probably should have applied this already if you have your fruit trees in the lower valley. If you're higher up, you still have time to do it. For fertilizing, you want something with a high middle number. Okay, that middle number, on this one it's 19. Most common one that people use will be 13, 16, 10. Okay, that one middle number is for flowers. Okay, if you do it too late, you're actually going to cause vegetative growth. That's why you want to do it early so that the fertilizer is there, especially like on a pear tree, which are horrible pollinators. You do it early, just as your grass is getting that like little green tinge, put it down. Most fruit trees are in your lawns. Horrible thing to do, but you should move the lawn away from your fruit tree as much as possible. If it's outside the drip line, okay, and that's where you want to apply the fertilizer. So if I'm the trunk of the tree, and my arms are the end of the branches, that's where I want you to put the fertilizer. So make a little hole, okay, and they'll sell tree spikes as well. Make little holes underneath the lawn roots and put in some fertilizer at that point. And those little feeder roots are what's going to feed the tree. Okay, so out at this area, not in here. So, and like I said, the reason you want to do it early is that the fertilizer will be there for when the buds break and the flowers break to make the pollen stronger, okay, or to help make the pollen stronger. If you do it too late, and you'll get into the situation where you have tons of vegetative growth, straight up, what I call water spouts, okay, especially on pears and apples. You'll have a mess. And then that causes a whole bunch more of pruning work for you to do, okay? If you're a landscaper, that's what you're going to want to do. Other thing, I didn't go to school for art, obviously. We're going to talk about a few things today about pruning to an outside bud. Okay, so if I'm the trunk of the tree, and there's always variables to every rule, but the general rule is you always prune to an outside bud. Okay, so away from the center of the tree when it's coming to fruit trees. Okay, so always prune out to the outside bud, not to a bud that's facing inside. Okay, because then you'll get this kind of thing. And that creates no airflow, more disease, just a nightmare for you to deal with. Okay? Where on the branch do you prune? So a lot of people, so if this is my bud branch, it's going out, what do you want to do and how do you want to prune it and what angle? So first of all, you're going to prune at a 45-degree angle, like that. That allows the moisture and the rain droplets to fall off. Especially on pears and apples where there's a lot of rot consideration, you don't want to also leave too much wood there. Okay, so ideally, and a lot of people, like I said, I'm not an artist. If I left this much wood here, you're going to have problems with rot. Okay, if I go and cut at a 45-degree angle here, because Maury said 45-degree angle, I still have the bud. You're not leaving what I will call a lot of meat to sustain that bud, okay? And I can guarantee you 99% of the time, the next bud's going the wrong way, okay? So the next bud will be an inside bud. So actually, if there's a bud here, you'd actually prune here to go back out. So there's not enough meat in that situation to sustain that bud's growth. So what you do is you want to have this as your kind of top of the bud and prune at a 45-degree here. So the back side of your pruning cut is at the top part of the bud. Hopefully that makes sense. The other one that you have to watch out for, and that we'll be talking about later today, is this. There's a ring on the branches. So we're going to talk about Y crotches and U crotches. You want to develop U crotches, especially for your fruit trees, to sustain that heaviness of that fruiting load. Okay, a Y crotch will break off quite easily. Okay, that's the one that's going to ruin your crop or hit your house or do whatever. So we need to make sure we eliminate Y crotches and develop U crotches as much as we can. On every tree that you look at, there's a little ring just before the main trunk of the tree and your branches going out. There's always this little ring. You want to prune just on the outside of that ring. Not out here, obviously, because there again, that's going to create rot. But just on the outside of that ring, not in the ring. Okay, I had a gentleman come to me so proud that of his job for pruning, that he took his sander out and sanded them nice and flush. Okay, and then wondered why the tree wasn't healing. That ring, the reason you want to prune on the outside, just on the outside of that ring, that's the ring that grows. You can actually see it grow over your pruning cut. Okay, so if we eliminate that ring, you eliminate the opportunity for that tree to actually heal itself. So just on the outside of that ring is where we want to make the cut. Okay, so those are the basic, simple principles of how to make your cut. Always to an outside bud, usually. Always on the outside of that ring. You have to know what fruit tree you're pruning. You prune every single fruit tree differently. Okay, the goal here is, as a homeowner, is fruit production, right? So we're not going to go and prune it like a shade tree or what the neighbor says. We're not listening to our neighbor. It can be overwhelming when you come in, especially if you bought a new house or have a house and it has a great big old tree. And we'll work through that whole process today. But the best thing you can do before you even touch the tree is take a picture of the tree, okay? And then as you work through it, the tree will actually teach you what you're doing right and wrong, okay? So if you prune a tree and you get no fruit, then you know that you pruned into, and I should talk about that, you pruned into wood that is your bearing fruit wood, okay? So every tree bears fruit on different wood. Some develop on spurs. Some are on what I would call fat buds. So again, fruiting. So this will be my, for lack of a better word, my branching bud, okay, or my leaf bud. Fruiting buds are usually like that. There's usually 3 buds all clustered together, or it will be a massively bigger bud than the other ones, okay? So these ones, we got to recognize where those buds are. If we go and they're on, like take a royal apricot, these buds are found on the tips. So if you go and say, oh, Maury said tip back by 1/3, that's the general rule. Guess what? You're not getting any apricots, okay? If you go and prune 3/4 of a branch on a peach tree, you're not going to get any fruit. Those fruiting buds, as a general rule, on a peach are in the middle 2/3. Okay, so when you're pruning, you need to look at the bark itself, and it will tell you where the buds are. Okay. So we'll jump into. We'll start with apples, I think, and pears. I loop apples and pears into the same kind of family. And here's a pear, and here's a good old apple that got away on us. Okay, so apples and pears produce on spurs. The more horizontal the branch is, the more spurs you'll get, more flowers you get, the more fruit you get. That's why pears and apples make great espalier trees, because they're literally lateral, making all these spurs. Okay, you can see here, the more pears especially want to just go straight up. Okay, and when it's young like this, we have the opportunity to bring these branches down, even if you want an upright tree and not do an espalier. Okay, so that's a key thing there, and I want to say it again. The more lateral the branch on an apple and pear, the more spurs you'll get, the more fruit you'll get. Okay, so we're always pruning to an outside bud as a general rule. except for, here's the rule. So if I go and prune to an outside bud, all I'm doing is driving this branch farther down. So that the general rule is yes, but you got to look at it and go, common sense, that don't make common sense because now it's going down. And then when you're mowing the grass, you'll be a little upset every time it hits you. So, and some varieties like a Gravestein, the whole tree just kind of wants to do this kind of thing. So you're going to be doing to an upside branch. This is why I'm saying you should take a picture. Because if you prune, because Maury said, go to an outside bud and it keeps going down, and you take it and look at the picture year after year and you go, oh, I'm doing it the wrong way. Pruning, we prune not only for fruit, but pruning, any type of pruning cut invigorates growth. Okay, so if it's a healthy tree and we prune to an outside bud, it's actually going to go outside. And what we want to strive with pears and apples, so we're going to go to an outside bud. That's my cut this year. And what we want is growth to occur here. Okay, and then next year, we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to prune to an outside bud, and then we'll have another branch come out here. So a perfectly pruned apple and pear tree, you'll see waves. The branches will actually be a wave, one after another after another. Apples and pears you do to a modified central leader, or you actually have a central leader. So you don't prune out that main central leader most of the time. You keep it and you pull these ones down. Okay, so on apples and pears, spurs is what you need to know. Outside buds, central leader, okay, or a modified central leader, meaning that you keep this, but you always have to keep one branch as the main branch. So if you notice on here, these on this pear, they're all competing to be number one. The top one actually sends a hormone back to the rest of the tree, says I'm number one. So slow down. Okay. As soon as you take out that central leader, you're going to see what happens going from an upside down umbrella to a vase real quick, which is not what you want on these varieties of trees. Okay. The other thing is, I don't know if everybody will see it. And you, just in case you don't know what a spur is. So a spur is this thing. When you're pruning, the thing that keeps cutting the underside of your arm or rubbing up against you, 9 times out of 10, that's the spur. And that's where your fruit's coming from. Don't prune the spur. Had a gentleman go and it annoyed him, like, and I can see it. Happens to me too. I get frustrated with something and I'm like, and take it all off. Don't take those off or else you won't get any fruit. Okay. These fruiting spurs, especially on an apple, are good to produce for 40 to 50 years. Okay, so you want to leave them. Okay. With all the trees that we're going to talk about today, if you are buying one this year or next year, or you just have a new one, that's great. Because when the tree's young, you want to develop the structure of the tree. I know it's hard to do. And you want that apple or you want that little peach to come along the first year, the second year, third year. Oh, goody. No, you have to stop that thought. We want to develop 3, 4, 5 branches, depending on the variety, okay, of tree, and develop that good structure, you crotches, good strong branches, and then the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th year, that will pay rewards beyond you trying to get a couple early peaches or apples or whatever it may be. Okay. So the other thing, like I said, pruning invigorates, right? And this is a hard thing to do. So here I have a tree that's unbalanced. Okay. Now, this branch is obviously more vigorous than this one, right? Hardest thing in the world to do. Guess which one you prune the hardest? The little one. and you don't touch this one. Okay, because pruning invigorates. So this already is vigorous. If I go and prune this hard because it's lopsided, all I've done is create more vigor and more energy, and you're going to have even a bigger situation like this. So you'd actually go and prune that. Or if it's really offside, you'd prune it right back to the trunk of the tree, okay? And then be vigilant for all the growth that will be coming out this way. Okay? The other thing with young trees, and it will happen in the summertime, is if you prune too hard and try and get things back into shape, and this is more for established trees, you'll have a lot of what we call water sprouts. They have no fruit-bearing capacity. They're the ones that go straight up, okay? And they're the ones that basically suck all the energy from the rest of the tree for producing spurs. So these are the ones that go straight up. What you want to do, now you have to be careful. So on an established fruit tree, like a pear or an apple, and you have a mess of a tree where it's all water sprouts. So it's been there for 10 years, and I have to tell you, and I don't know who the landscaper is, or whatever they are, if they are, but going up Summit, Gordon Horn Crescent, or Gardens, they're apartment buildings, and for years and years and years, there's flowering crabs there. And flowering crabs are the same family as apple fruiting trees. And every year, and maybe your neighbors do this too, every year there's all these water sprouts. I call them moose antlers, but whatever. Every year they're up. And then every spring, they come along and mow down the water sprouts year after year. And what does pruning do? Especially to water sprout, invigorates it. So if you prune hard on a water sprout, where you had one, you're going to have two. And where you had two, you have four. It multiplies. But guess what? That landscaper ensured his livelihood, because he goes back year after year after year, creating the same problem. We're going to be smarter today. When you have that problem at home, it's a slow roll, and it's a 3-year methodical practice. Okay? So you can't go and take them all off. So if you have all these water sprouts, and they're all sitting there, and this is what it's going to look like, just a mess of branches all the way along here, going straight up. So in the early spring, take one out and right to the trunk. These ones you're going to have to leave, even though your neighbor tells you, no, you should take them off. No, mind your business. In the summertime, take one out. Where these two cuts were made, you have to be vigilant, because this cut early in the spring is now 2 water sprouts coming. And we're not pruning these. Pruning invigorates. We're rubbing them out. So when they're just about 1 inch to 2 inches high, you just want to go over there and snap them off. You don't want to get them to this size, obviously, but when they're just little pliable, like so, you just break them off. That will destroy the dormant basal bud that's there. So now you've eliminated that water sprout. And the one in the summertime, same thing. In the fall, it will kind of sprout a little bit. You come off and rub it out. You'll have to leave these ones. And this is the one that you go and prune out next year, and be vigilant in June and rub it out again. And then eventually that's how you get control of your tree back. So the 3rd year, you won't have all these water sprouts. You've maintained the branch, you have it horizontally, and you're getting the production of the tree back into the fruit. Now, like I mentioned, apples and pears produce on spurs. Let's say I don't have any spurs on this branch, even though it's nice and horizontal. Takes a while, takes some patience, but you can take that water sprout and have it spaced out every 12 inches or so, no closer than 6 inches. But you can take that water sprout and turn it into a spur. So every year you go back, and sometimes it will take 5 years for it to actually spur up for you, okay? But you can leave that spur and prune it back to one bud every year. Okay, one bud, one bud, one bud on the new growth. And then it will spur up for you most of the time. Okay, so we can use those water sprouts, one, to make sure that we have employment if we're pruning, and two, to actually create a situation where, hey, we can get some fruit production out of it. We can take something bad and make it good if we don't have any spurs in this area. Okay. So probably all looking at me saying, what would I do with this tree? So there again, it's an apple. Here's an example, I don't know if everybody can see it, of a Y crotch right here. Okay. Very, very weak. And like I said, believe it or not, I went to a clinic many, many years ago, Dr. Shigo. And the reason we want to eliminate Y crotches, sorry, I don't mean to turn my back to you. I want to actually do, so remember I talked about this ring, right? Well, on a Y crotch, what happens inside the tree is that Y crotch is actually growing like so and getting thicker like that. Okay, and most of the time the Y crotch, as you can see here, is almost as big as the main central leader of the tree. So now I have two competing branches to be number one with a Y crotch. And what's happening, if I left it like that, inside the tree where you can't see, this inside ring is actually choking out the main tree and taking, so you got to think all the nutrients are coming up and now they're hitting here, heading over, hitting here, heading over. So, and these ones are still going up, but at less and less, it's like a clogged artery, right? It just keeps getting stifled and stifled. And on a shade tree, like take a maple, where you have opposite branches, they're growing in like that. That's why the center of your shade of your maple tree snaps off in the wind and falls 20 years down the road. Okay, so as it comes to fruiting, we want to eliminate that. So in this instance, how it's going, I want to prune that out. Okay, so I don't have the competition. Okay, and as a general rule with apples and pears, you're going to head back about a third, no more than 2/3 year after year. Okay, whether it's an established or a new one. Okay, and then in this case, I would go do that. I'm going to probably do that. Okay, so because you have to remember the tree's young, and I want to develop the tree first. So, like I said, I headed back there. I'll head back here. And this one is going to be interesting. I'm actually going to go to an upside bud. Okay, because the next one is going straight down. Okay, so I want to go do that. I'll have to be careful that it doesn't go straight up, and if I do, then I might have to come back this way into it. Here again, I have very narrow crotch. Now, we can do this. Okay, pull it. So you'll see people put sticks in the middle here with nails on each end to push it down. You'll see people put women's nylons, rocks and women's nylons, pull it down this way, kind of add some weight. So when the tree is pliable like this, when it's young, and you have this tree, this might be a benefit to you. Okay. However, in this situation, with this tree being this age, I have 1, 2, 3 branches. Yes, I would like a branch out here somewhere. Okay. So, but by heading it back, I'll probably get some lateral growth coming out the rest of the tree. So hopefully I can fill this void. Okay. So this one actually serves me no purpose. And so I have this one, and I'll go hard on that one, like I mentioned. Okay. And then you can see the growth died there, and it's just rotting. And then on this situation, same thing. I'm going to be going more to an upwards one, which will kind of come out this way. Okay. And that hopefully goes that way. And then I'll head back. So those are actually spurs, right? And now I look up at the top there, and it's just a mess. I have 3 branches all vying to be number 1. If I had lots of branches down here and I was happy with it, I would actually do this scenario, and I chose number 1, right? Don't let nature choose number 1. But because I'm trying to develop the tree, I'm actually coming down into here. Okay, by doing that, it pushes a lot of energy laterally to build these nice and strong. Okay. Yes, you always have the center one. So really, if I wanted to, I could come into here, but because I have the short one, I don't want to prune this one too hard. I just need to be vigilant on that and know that that's still the number 1. So that's my apple in the first couple of years. Here's a pear, and pears are like I said, all narrow crotching, all want to go be number 1. Okay, so pears are very difficult to make as an upside down umbrella. In this situation, I would be pulling 1, 2, and 3 here down this year, and probably this one as 4. So now I have 3 branches. I have 3 branches all vying. Basically, these 3 are all vying to be number 1. Or I can really reduce the height of the whole tree and come into here and make this number 1 and pull these ones down more laterally. Okay, so there again, I have about 5,000 fruit trees to prune. I do things a little different. I'm a little aggressive sometimes, but when the tree's young, I'm just looking at the structure. I don't care about fruit production. Okay? But this work done now will lower the tree. So branches, if the branch is here at, let's call it 4 feet, the branch doesn't grow with the tree. The branch is always at 4 feet. The tree grows. The rest grows. So that will always be at 4 feet. So if, like I mentioned, I want to pull those ones down laterally, whether it's nylon or a nail or something, to get them out more, and to keep it nice and low, I would do that. Okay, I've taken all the competition out, right? And now I have a situation here again, right? This is my main one. I want it to be the main one. I want to come back into here. And I'm lightly heading these back, like so. Okay, so there I've taken the height out just by taking that. It's no different than when you're building and it works better as an analogy for the cherry tree. But if you're like a 1/2 inch out at the foundation, you're going to be, by the time you get to the roof, you're going to be like feet out. Okay, so the same kind of principle is here. I took out that growth because those branches are always going to be at that height. And I've lowered my tree in one foul swoop of just a cut and managed this growth and keeping these ones down. So now I can actually pick the pears and spray a lot easier and all that fun stuff. Okay, so those are apples and pears. Here, and I don't want to belabor the point. So here's a pear. And maybe some of you, so now this is an established pear, right? And you're looking at that going, holy cow. And the one thing I forgot to say are the 3 Ds, right? Dead, damaged, and diseased. So when you approach a tree like this, right? And it's going to be a large amount of work, step back for a second. And by the time you do the dead, damaged, and I put dead and damaged and diseased all kind of together, and directional. I add a 4th one, which is directional. Okay, so I call it the 4 Ds, but if you Google it, they'll say 3 Ds. Anyways, by the time you finish pruning those 3 Ds, 4 Ds, you're almost done all your pruning. And then you prune for the variety of tree that it is and the fruit production where it's coming from on that fruit tree. Okay. So in this case, if I'm the main trunk of the tree and these are my branches, I have a lot of mess going on around here, right? And yes, I have a lot of spurs. There's beautiful spurs in here, okay? But if I'm the tree, and this is my established tree, I'm actually doing a lot of that, right? And then you'll have to watch on this scenario with this and this, that they're not coming and competing with each other. I would also go and prune that because we want to prune to an outside bud. This one's coming in. So on my branches, that's kind of what I would be doing. Depending on what's going on in front of me and around, you may take this branch all the way back. So that's a pair. That's kind of just a light pruning. And just by doing that, taking out any competing ones, any branches going to the inside, you've done most of your pruning. And then you just head back by a third to keep the spurs and that. Okay. Same with, here's an apple. So there again, if I'm this tree, so this is a spur. Okay, so I'll probably keep that, even though it's in the middle here, but it's produced for me, right? So I don't necessarily want to take it off. There again, there's a spur there, okay? And then there's this weak, whatever you want to call that, growth happening there, which is a total mess, because there again, if you go apply the same principles, anything that's rubbing, going into the inside, anything that's weak, damaged, by the time you finish that, you're going to be amazed that that's almost all your pruning. So we'll just come into here, right? And I'm going to do this whole branch I don't like, but so what I want to do here, I want to try, see how this branch is kind of competing with all this, and I have nothing over here. I want to do that and hope that I can direct a branch coming towards you out this way. Okay. I have obviously a broken one here that I will turn off. So, and then if I was the center of the tree, obviously, this is coming back into the situation. So honestly, you'd probably do something like that. Okay, now you've opened up the middle part. Here you have one going straight up again. I'm going to an outside bud, right? And then here I do that and head back. And then just lightly head back by a third there. So I didn't really take too much off. I just took off some of the things that were crossing and damaged and broken. So there again, that's a spur. That's a spur. I have a spur here. So they're going to fruit for me. So those are apples and pears. I'll do a cherry next. So, the good old cherry tree. So, like I mentioned earlier, the branch doesn't grow up, okay? And you may laugh, and some people get upset, and they go, Maury, you want $90 for the tree, right? For this. This is how you want it, to be honest. And if, like I said, I do all the pruning for all the trees, where I'd love to prune it for you is right here. And then you'd come to the nursery and go, you want $100 for 36 inches? Really? Really? So I have to keep it like that because you'll think I'm crazy. But cherry trees, especially cherry trees on standard, like Colt or Colt rootstock, you want to have the branches as low as possible. Because if you go to Brock, especially downtown Kamloops, there's some really old cherry trees. And all the cherries are at the very, very top. The birds are loving you. How do you get to pick that cherry? And how do you make it so that you can spray it and do all that fun stuff? So if you have a tree like this, and you're just the first time homeowner, you want to put in a cherry tree, honest to goodness, you want to prune it here. You want then, by pruning this, what we call heading back, the main leader, you're going to push tons of lateral growth. So what will happen here is you're going to have 6-8 branches come out here, and guess what? Then you get to choose the spacing of those branches, and you'll want 4 branches from there. Maybe 5, but 4 for sure, coming out. And those will be with you and the cherry tree there again for 35, 40 years. Okay? If you let it go up there, no different than the house, half an inch. Imagine having all your main branches 4 or 5 feet high and where your cherries are going to be. So that's why, and all joking aside, you want it to be pruned there. Okay. So there again is really probably cherry trees are probably by far the most important tree to get when it's young to establish that. And as you can see, cherry trees, so all these, and remember I said we need to know the difference between a fruiting bud and leaf bud. If you look, here's all the cherries right here on the tree for you, right? And then farther down, there's just a single bud here, right? So you wouldn't want to, let's say you're having a hard time doing this, and you're like, oh, I'll meet them halfway, I'm going to go here. You don't want to prune here, okay, into the fruiting spurt. You will actually want to go to here, come back down, or you'd come back up into here and leave that. Okay. Even though at this age of tree, you don't want that situation because now the energy is going into the fruit production, not developing the tree. When it comes to an established cherry tree, a lot more work. You'll get, like you can see, the growth that has happened. Most of the fruit bearing wood is, the best one is about 2 to 4 years old. Okay, so you'll have your main structure of your tree, and then you'll have all this growth up top. Okay, when it comes to an established tree like that, of a cherry tree, you only can take about 25, maybe 30% of the whole canopy off. Okay, there again, if you prune hard and try and eliminate all that wood that you can't reach, you're going to cause a lot of structural problems with the cherry tree. Plus, two, you're going to have so much rampant growth, because you have to imagine an established cherry tree, the power in the root system and the energy that's there. And so the harder you prune back here, it's just going to, it has to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere, and it's just going to push more. So we have to be very diligent not to do more than 25, 30% of that top growth. What you want to do on an established cherry tree is eliminate that 5-year-old wood or that 4-year-old wood that has produced for you. Not all of it, but get onto a cycle where you're taking out the oldest wood, 4 or 5 years old, that's going to slow down on production, and eliminate it back to your main branches. That allows new growth to come on and replace that in that area, but you've kept the tree nice and lower. You've gotten better bearing fruit, okay? And you just work on a cycle. It would be like a 3-4 year old cycle where you're taking 25% out every year of that old wood. Okay, yeah. So you can see this is a sour cherry. It's more of a bush type, right? So it's smaller, and you don't really have to do too much. If branches were coming in here, right, and at the most maybe you do something like that, maybe at the most, right? Maybe head that one back a little bit so that, or just do that, right? But that's when it's young. When it's older, you're just anything rubbing, broken, rubbing, anything like that, you take out, and that's all you do. Okay. Getting to my favorite, peaches. Okay, so cherries, if you didn't pick up on that, cherries produce on, for lack of better words, spurs as well. But those spurs only produce really, really well for about 2 to 4 years. Okay. Peaches and nectarines produce on wood that was formed last year in the summer. Okay. Doesn't produce on wood that's 2 years old, doesn't produce on wood that's 3 years old. Okay. So when the tree's young, same kind of principle, you're making those 3-4 branches, right? When the fruit tree is established and you're wanting fruit, knowing that where the fruit is produced on last year's growth, all this growth that happened last year for us, which is all this, the tree can't sustain all that new growth, because if you have a peach tree, it probably grew very, very nicely for you, and you're looking at that like, there's a few loads to Cinnamon Ridge here, right? An established peach tree, take a picture after you prune, 75% of that wood should be gone. All the wood that grew last year, you want to prune out 75% of that wood. The tree can't sustain, you're asking a lot for it, all that wood and produce a whole bunch of great big juicy peaches. If you left all that wood, one, your peaches are going to be quite small. Two, it's all broke, it's going to break, it's going to fall apart. The tree just can't sustain it, okay? So, but notice that I said 75% of the wood that grew last year, because now you have an established peach tree with the 4 main branches. I'm not saying take off those structural branches. You prune down to those structural branches. So 75% of the wood that grew last year down to your structural branches. If you get a tree like this, which you shouldn't here, and I'll step back for a second. So the other thing is peaches are notorious for dehydration, okay? And the way the winters are going, you probably do have some damage on your peaches and nectarines, probably your apricots as well. The easiest thing to do, if you're wondering about it, is to take some branches that you prune, stick them in the house in water and see if they bloom. Okay, right there will tell you where we're at. Just because we're so mild and so dry, and then we get into the situation where we got that cold snap, and the buds were probably nice, and especially if you're downtown, all nice and full, and then that wind and the cold just basically freeze dries them. Okay, remember it was not a big thing for me, but a few years ago we had the apricot pandemic thing where all the apricots were dying. It was not a big thing for me, but it really concerned some people. And that's very much what could happen this year, right? Just because, and depending on what happens coming ahead, if we always get a cold snap just before Valentine's Day or just after Valentine's Day. That's how I kind of in my little brain go. And sure enough, that's what happened. Now we're super warm again. And I'm going to guess there's going to be a coolness somewhere along the lines here that will affect us. So everything is starting to push. You can see it. I walked along the river the other day. You can, things are out. They're pushing. If we get cool, then that's what will happen to your buds, your fruiting buds. And there's nothing we can do about it with Mother Nature. But getting back to my peach, if my peach tree is here, I know that they dehydrate. I know it can't carry all this wood, okay? And if I had this tree, so lucky for you, I prune the trees before they go out. And these are the ones that I actually prune hard. Now remember, I'm pruning it hard because they dehydrate, and these are bare root. So what you want is, when it's bare root, you want more roots than you do top. And in this situation, you look at the pot, there's just a little bit of roots. And it's supposed to sustain all that. And add in that they dehydrate, you have a problem. So we have to make it more balanced. Okay. And then I'll do that. So what I've done for you then is, so that's about 75% without even thinking about it really. I would nip it back a little bit, right? So I have, if you look, I have 3 whorls of 3. And 9 times out of 10, if you come here after I finish pruning everything, most of the trees will be like this, okay? So these are my structural branches. These are the ones that will produce for me. As a tree grows, you're actually going to take out, in probably the 3rd or 4th year, you're going to take out that central leader, because there again, peaches want a more open vase style. Okay, it would be a cross between an umbrella and a vase right in the middle there. So you're going to actually take that out. And so I have 6 nice structural branches that will sustain my growth. And then these ones are where my fruiting wood will come down 3 years from now. You'll have all this, and you'll be eliminating back to these main branches, year after year. Okay, while maintaining some new branches that grew last year to get it. And if you look really closely, because you're going to say, how do I know where to prune? It's really hard sometimes. And I know you're supposed to prune early. Everybody gets this. But if you have gone into a place or you're unsure of what you're doing, even with the Maury saying in that branch, right, all my fruiting spurs are here, or all my fruiting buds are right here in the middle 2/3 as a general rule. Okay. If you have that and you're still not sure, it's okay to wait a little bit to learn. The tree will teach you, okay, well that's my budding, that's my fruiting bud. And once they start to swell, then you can actually see it. So you don't have to run out there today. Yes, if the tree is nice and healthy, you won't have the potential, like if it's unhealthy, to get disease in there. But by waiting just a hair, you can actually see the buds, what you're doing. So if you have no clue what variety of tree you have, or you can't see that, and you don't want to come into here, because then you're taking out your fruit, just wait a little bit and see to past bud swell of what you get. And in a bad winter, it may not be a bad idea to actually wait and see what happens. Or like I said, go out there today on those soft fruits, prune out a branch that you think you're going to take out, and take it inside and see if it's going to flower for you. Okay. So that's peaches and nectarines. Nectarines, you don't prune at 75%. You probably go down to about 50% of that growth. But definitely the peaches are somewhere between 65 and 70%. Plums. There again, plums, we're going to break them up into 2 groups. European plums, like an Italian prune plum, and Japanese plums. Okay, you prune them slightly different. They both produce on spurs that are 2 years old. Okay, once an Italian prune plum is established, like 10 years down the road, all the pruning you'll be doing is no different than a sour cherry with that Italian prune plum. Okay, it's just a maintenance thing. It doesn't have a ton of growth happening to it, and you're going to do Italian prune plum probably to a modified central leader, or an upside, or take out that leader but still have the basis. Well, I correct that. The Italian prune plum, I would still have the leader coming out, okay, as a modified central leader. Okay, and what I don't know if you're to be clear on that, when I say, so a central leader is, like I said, apples and pears are straight up, right? You got one main one going. A modified one is trying to do the best of both worlds. So if this is my tree and this is my central leader, what happens when I have this stuff going on? Okay, so there's my upside down umbrella, but a modified central leader would be if I have a branch coming up this way and I take this one out, and this one kind of is part of the upside down umbrella. It's to the side, and like these ones are coming up here. Like I said, I'm not an artist, but so you've eliminated the central leader, but the modified central leader is you've taken one of the outside branches and kind of made it the leader, but to the side, if that makes any sense. That allows you to have open space here, which is what you need. So same principle, when it's young, you want to have, on an Italian prune plum, you want to have the modified central leader. Japanese plums are like apricots. They just want to grow, 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 grow. And the harder you prune them, the more they grow. And so this is the problem. And like apricots, Japanese plums have brittle wood. Not as brittle as an apricot, but it's still pretty brittle. With with uh, with the Japanese plums, don't try and make it an umbrella. Don't try and make it a modified leader. You're going to do a vase, okay, with an open center, okay? But the vase, to ask brittle wood to go laterally is not going to happen. What will happen if, as years go on, so Japanese plums and apricots as well have very narrow crotching just by nature. And it wrecks the tree when you go and try and make it a U-shaped one. And so, like I said, there's general rules and then there's rules that apply to certain ones. So to try and make something that's rigid like this to go like that, very, very difficult. The actual branch will actually fall as your growth happens inside here. So this kind of, you almost can see it here, right? This was very upright at one time, and as the weight of the other branches come on, it's falling, okay? And what will happen, and this is a bad, I don't know, this is a good example. I don't know if everybody can see it, but this branch here is where I'll have a lot of fruit on there, okay? This branch will eventually take over for it, okay? This is a branch that grew last year. So because this will keep going down, right? So then this branch will take over for the one right here. Hopefully I'm explaining it properly. This one takes over for that, and guess what? This one will eventually take over for that one, okay? So going back to my little drawing, in my vase scenario, I'll take that. In my vase scenario, if this is my branches and we have this type of scenario happening, right? That's what that new wood is happening with. First of all, with your vase, you're going to take out, you want to space these branches at least 12 inches apart. Okay, so you're going to eliminate that whole growth. Unlike apple trees and pears, these are kind of your glorified water sprouts, but they're not. When it pertains to Japanese maples and apricots, this is going to be your fruit-bearing wood. Okay, but where there's 3, what I want you to do, or 4, you want to actually, I want to make it easy, make it 5 for me. I'm going to take out all the way to your main branch, right out. Take out to your main branch, right out. And then head these back here to produce lateral, and that's where your fruit's going to be, in there. Okay, now as we get older, this branch will keep falling. And what will happen is that this branch at the end kind of falls away and this one takes over for it. So it kind of falls and you'll have more growth coming in here. You laminate some of that, and this branch, eventually this branch here will go all the way over here, if that makes any sense. So you're kind of, it's here and branches in the middle, and as you gets older and older, all these branches will eventually take over this spot somewhere along the line that you leave, okay, and that are 12 to 14 inches apart. So in this situation, so that's when it's young, obviously. As it's getting older here, we have to be a little bit more careful, okay? And so we have to balance, there again, the best producing wood are on spurs. So all these here are producing for me, okay, all the way along here. So we're talking any wood that's over 2 years old is going to produce for me, okay? You have to balance all this new growth. So here again, if this is and we're going to pretend this is actually my Japanese plum planted in the ground, okay? I have this kind of mess coming in here, okay? So the first thing that I'm doing is that. Watch. Okay, so I've eliminated. Yep, so that's the middle of my vase. I have the 3-4 branches here. I'm opening up the center. Then you start looking at some of this mess up in here. Now we have to be careful. So you have to balance am I wanting wood that will produce for me, which is the top one, middle one here, okay? Or am I going to start replacing that wood and to start looking around at the other branches? The desire would be to prune out this, right? Prune out this, prune out that, but now you've eliminated a lot of your fruit, okay? You have to balance it to, okay, new wood, fruiting wood, and find that happy medium year after year, okay? So in this situation, because my tree is getting so tall, I'm going to come right back in there. And then back into here, I'd probably do that. I'd probably come up in here. And then I have, so these branches are rubbing and cutting, right? And then this one is causing me problems. Same thing with here. This one's growing back inside. Okay. This part here is weak. And then looking at this mess here, there again, that's coming into that one, but I could eliminate it by having one of these eliminate, but I know for sure I want to take that one out. And so that's what I was talking about with that. You go right back to your main branches. I want to keep this one, right? And I'm going to head it back lightly. So that is going to take over this area. Eventually, I'll probably end up pruning like 2 or 3 years down the road this branch out. And this will have established. I want to leave this for this year. I'll probably prune that there. So I maintain fruiting wood. I have new wood coming on to produce fruit for me, right? I have this one going this way. I want to leave this side for now, but I know that next year I'll eliminate this one. And actually, I'll do that so they don't compete. I'll keep an eye on for that one for this year. I don't want to eliminate it because I've taken a lot of growth off already. So I'm going to just watch the front row there. Okay. Okay, so that's all the pruning I want to do. Now I'm just going to head back by 1/3 of the branches that I've left. So the spurs should only be no closer than 6 inches or so. So these are fruiting spurs, so that's a very good question because I didn't cover it. So you'd probably do stuff like that. Leave 1, 2, 3, take that one off, right? So now you're getting space between there, okay? So we eliminated the spurs to space out the fruit to get better fruit quality, okay? And like I mentioned, I have to keep some of last year's wood here so that if I prune it back or took off all of last year's wood, then I'm going to have a bigger problem this year because wherever I eliminate is going to be growing even faster. So that's why you have to be careful. It's good in the summertime to go and look at your fruit trees, all your fruit trees, and just reevaluate where we're at for those water sprouts or where we made our pruning cuts and just rub out some of that growth. So that's that. Apricots, same principle, but just understand that the wood is more brittle. Okay, so and apricots produce on wood that's like 2 years old, but there's spurs on an apricot as well that are long-lived. Okay, basically an apricot, it's hard to kill an apricot, to be quite frank. And it's hard to prune it in a way that would kill it either. I've tried. But the basic principle is the same as a Japanese plum, created in a vase, even more importantly because of how they are, and just replace that wood, but take it back to your main structural branches if you are going to eliminate wood. The worst thing, no matter what you're pruning, the worst thing in life to do is go, oh, and you see it, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, right? People just don't beat around the bush. Just do it, right? Eliminate something and then deal with the consequences. That there, all that's going to do is create that next year. Like that, you're just going to cause more and more work. So if you're going to eliminate something, like if you're going to pruning, even if you don't know what you're doing and you stray from the 3 or 4 Ds, if you're going to do something, just do something, right? And then you'll have to deal with it. But that little bit of, and maybe that's extreme. I'm always told I prune way too hard, but by doing just a little bit, that moose antler effect is going to be your downfall and nightmare for you. Okay, instead of being on one beer while you're pruning, you're going to, or one glass of wine while you're pruning, you're going to be a bottle of wine trying to figure out the tree. So, so that's it for fruit trees. Another one that I get asked a lot about are grapes. And so, yes, there's a million different ways to do grapes. In Kamloops, as a general rule, and in Kamloops for the homeowner, we do the cordon effect. So there again, grapes live like apples, 50 years, even longer, right? Yes, everybody's ripping out grapes in the valley and replanting. But as a homeowner, this is my grape and it's established. So I want to do an established grape. And you have, I'll do 4 cordon. Like so. Just like I said, not an artist. So this is my grape. This is my main plant of my grape that's grown. It's going to be all gnarly wood. It looks gray. It's like, really, this is going to produce something? It looks dead for all the way into May, right? Like, are you alive? And then these branches are your cordons. You usually choose 2 or 4, okay? And you put them on wires against the fence or whatever it may be. And then on here, you'll have tons of growth happening like that, like so. Okay. Okay. So if this is your grape, what you're going to do there again, probably about 12 inches, no more than closer than 6-8 inches. You're going to eliminate right back to these cordons. Okay. And this is the growth that happened last year. Okay. So that's all that growth happened last year. Then what I want to do is, now you'll have on here, you'll have 2 or 3 branches. You'll have actually buds all the way, but so last year's growth, I've eliminated right down to the major cordons, leaving space. Then I'm going to prune this back to 2 or 3 buds. Okay. So, and grapes looking dead, if you don't know what you're doing, that's why it's good to actually wait to see if they kind of break dormancy a little bit. And yes, they'll weep sap. Yes, there's a risk of disease getting in there, but more so for like Vancouver and stuff. Kamloops is drier. The chances of a fungal disease getting in there are minimal. And if you don't know what you're looking for, or you don't know if there's any damage, that's why I always wait till it actually gets some swollen buds out there. So prune last year's growth back to 2 or 3 buds all the way along here. Okay. So I have my spacing. I back to 2 or 3 buds, and guess what? This year, it will grow. 2 buds will grow for you, and that's where my grapes are. Right? That's what's going to flower and grape for you. Okay, and then you also get. I'll do it a different color. Look at that. So that's what you do this year to produce and get your fruit. Okay, and then it'll also grow here for you. You'll probably get some suckers coming off of here as well, that kind of stuff, right? So the blue is what happens this year, and the green is happening this year as well, but I'll put a little bit of blue stripes with it just to be fancy. So that's all this year's growth. Okay, this is producing for you next year, spring of 2027. You're going to actually eliminate that out, right? Right out, all the way back to the cordons. Okay, and you'll cut these ones back to 2 buds. and prune them back. So in the spring of 2027, and then in the summer of 2027, these have grown. You'll get some growth in here. And guess what? This growth is what you keep for 2028, eliminating back these ones. You don't have to. You can keep using these. A lot of people, so that's one way of doing it. If you wanted to do the other way, is you've pruned back the 2 buds and you get all that growth. Now these are, and I wish I had a better picture, but these are think of them as just a great big knot in a rope, okay? So these you can, because you spent time on it and you've established these. So these, you'll prune back to like 2 every year, but they still keep producing more buds coming out. So you can keep these for a long time, right? And they'll still produce underneath. So you have that, and you'll have buds coming back. So you'll have like 3 or 4 coming out of there. So you choose which one you want, which vine you want, and prune it back to 2 buds. So this knot will have a lot of buds coming out of it for you to replace and choose which vines you want to come out. But always the basic principle is just go down back to two buds. If by chance one of these dies, right, then you can replace it. If one of these cordons dies, or you don't like it, or it's just weak, or it's not growing very well, then you can replace it with some of this growth here. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes you have to wait 2 or 3 years for it to, because you're pruning back, right? And pruning down creates push to the side. This might take 2 or 3 years while you're waiting. So you might want to leave that one, and then when one comes along that's really vigorous, then go and prune that out and let it be replaced by this one. But if you go, come on, it may just not do it. It will take a number of years to push that lateral growth. Okay. The other one I get asked a lot about is raspberries. So as a general rule, raspberries, if you don't know if you have ever bearing or summer bearing, treat it all like a summer bearing one. So prune them after they fruit in the summer. Okay. So what? There's floricanes and primicanes. Thank you. So primicanes are the canes that are 1-year-old wood. What grows this year is what is a primicane. Primicanes, floricanes are wood that's 2 years old. Primicanes turn into floricanes. Okay. So if this, there again, I have my canes of my raspberry. Okay, and so if you look out there right now, and if you just planted it this year, you probably, and so I'm doing what you planted last year, and then we'll talk about ones that are established. If you don't know what you have, then treat it, like I said, all like a primicane. Okay, so this grew for us this year. What you're going to do next year is you're going to actually prune out the oldest canes right to the ground. Okay. What will happen if these, like take Heritage and Autumn Bliss, so they'll produce in the late summer, early fall, at the very tips of your primicane. Okay. Next year, your floricane will produce for you, and then after they produce in the summertime, you eliminate them right down to the ground. Basically, the easiest way to say it is after they fruit, a raspberry fruits, then prune it down right down to the ground, the oldest canes. And then this summer, new canes will come up that will fruit and bear fruit for you next year. Okay. There's Heritage and Autumn Bliss will flower for you on a new cane. So this is a new cane this year. If you get fruit on there, you know they'll call it an ever-bearing one too. Okay, they'll produce at the tips. You leave that. I always prune out the tips after they've flowered, okay, or fruited, and then, but at the tip. And then this will produce fruit for you in the summer. Same with this one that grew this year for next summer. Okay? Does that make sense? But the basic principle, though, is you prune it back right down to the ground, the oldest canes that bore fruit for you during the summer.